My date was wearing a sweater that looked like it had been knitted by a depressed grandmother, and he had been talking about server latency for 20 minutes. I was already planning my escape route. But then I noticed his hands. They were scarred, rough, and steady, not the hands of an it guy who typed all day. I was about to ask him who he really was, but the front window of the bistro exploded before I could open my mouth. Glass rained down like deadly confetti. I didn't even have time to scream. The man sitting across from me, Ken, the IT consultant who had just spilled water on himself 5 minutes ago, moved with a speed that defied physics. He didn't duck. He launched himself forward. One hand grabbed my wrist, his grip like iron, and the other slammed upward, flipping the heavy oak table onto its side as if it weighed nothing. We crashed to the floor behind the makeshift barricade, just as the wood splintered under a hail of bullets. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive into the chaos, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. Dust and plaster filled the air, choking me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. But my mind, the part of me that tracked illicit funds through shell corporations and offshore accounts, snapped into a cold, hyper-focused clarity. "Stay down," Ken whispered. But the voice wasn't Ken's. The high-pitched, stuttering tenor I'd endured for the last hour was gone. This voice was a low, guttural rumble, vibrating with command. I looked up at him through the haze. The oversized glasses were skewed on his face, but the man beneath them had changed. The slump in his shoulders had vanished. He was crouched like a predator, checking the reflection in a shard of broken glass near his boot. "3 shooters," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Entry points Alpha and Bravo. You're not in it," I hissed, wiping drywall dust from my cheek. He didn't look at me. He reached into the waistband of those terrible, ill-fitting corduroys and pulled out a matte black pistol that looked decidedly illegal. "And you're too smart for a blind date, Ashanti. Keep your head down." The gunfire paused, the reload interval. In that split second of silence, Ken moved. He didn't scramble, he flowed. He vaulted over the overturned table, firing 2 shots in rapid succession. Bang, bang. 2 wet thuds followed. I peeked around the edge of the wood just in time to see him engage the 3rd attacker. The gunman, a massive man in a tactical vest, rushed him. Ken didn't shoot. Instead, he holstered the weapon in a blur of motion, caught the man's wrist, and twisted it with a sickening crunch. He swept the man's legs, driving a knee into the attacker's chest as they hit the ground. A single sharp blow to the throat ended the struggle. Silence fell over the ruined bistro. The only sound was the sizzling of a severed electrical wire near the bar. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, but I forced myself to remain upright. I wasn't going to cower. I analyzed the scene. The precision, the efficiency. This wasn't a street brawl, this was military-grade execution. Or worse. The man formerly known as Ken stood over the unconscious attacker. He adjusted his cuff, a reflex of someone used to wearing tailored suits, not polyester sweaters. He reached up and slowly peeled the thick black-rimmed spectacles from his face. They were broken at the bridge. He tossed them onto the corpse at his feet. He turned to face me. The goofy, harmless expression was wiped clean. His face was hard, angular, and devastatingly handsome in a terrifying way. His eyes were dark voids, devoid of panic, devoid of mercy. He looked at me and spoke in his real, deep voice. "Date's over. Run or die. Your choice, Ashanti. Run or die." It wasn't a question. It was a binary command, and I've spent my entire career dealing in binary logic. Zeros and ones. Profit and loss. Life and death. I didn't freeze. I didn't wait for him to grab my hand again. I turned on my heel, my expensive Italian leather heel, and bolted toward the kitchen, swinging doors. I heard his heavy boots thudding right behind me, a rhythmic cadence of controlled violence. We burst into the kitchen, a chaotic landscape of stainless steel and steam. A sous chef dropped a pan of marinara sauce. the red splatter looking too much like blood for my comfort. I didn't stop. The floor was slick with grease and spilled sauce. I knew physics wasn't on my side. Without breaking stride, I kicked off my pumps. First the left, then the right. I wasn't going to die because of footwear. Back exit, the man who wasn't Ken barked, his voice echoing off the metal counters. He was guiding me, his body acting as a shield between my back and the dining room we just fled. We hit the alleyway, bursting out into the cool, damp night air. It smelled of wet asphalt and rotting garbage, a stark contrast to the aroma of truffle oil we had left behind. My lungs burned, adrenaline flooding my system with a metallic taste. "Where is your car?" I demanded, breathless, scanning the alley for the rusty hatchback Ken had claimed he drove. "Here." He didn't point to a hatchback. 3 matte black SUVs tore around the corner, their engines roaring like trapped beasts. They moved in perfect formation, tires screeching in unison as they boxed us in, creating a wall of steel between us and the street. The doors of the lead and rear vehicles flew open instantly. 6 men spilled out. They weren't wearing sweaters. They were dressed in sharp, identical charcoal suits, earwigs coiled behind their ears, submachine guns held low and ready. I stepped back, my bare feet scraping against the grit of the pavement. I expected them to aim at us. Instead, they formed a perimeter. The closest one, a man with a scar slicing through his eyebrow, bowed at a perfect 90-degree angle. "Sajing Nim," he said, his voice reverent. "The perimeter is compromised. We need to move, now. Sajang Nim, boss. President." I looked at my date. The bumbling it consultant was gone. He stood tall, acknowledging the bow with a curt nod that screamed authority. He grabbed my arm, not gently this time, and shoved me toward the middle vehicle. "Get in," he ordered. "I'm not getting in that car with you," I snapped, digging my heels in. "I'm calling the police." He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply scooped me up as if I weighed no more than a ledger, tossed me into the back seat of the armored SUV, and climbed in after me. The heavy door slammed shut with a finality that made my stomach drop. The lock engaged with a hydraulic hiss. "Go," he told the driver. The SUV surged forward, the force pinning me against the plush leather seats. Inside, the air was filtered and cool, completely silent despite the chaos outside. The soundproofing was military grade. I scrambled to the door handle, yanking it. Locked. I checked the window controls. Disabled. I was trapped in a luxury cage. Next to me, the man began to strip. I pressed myself against the door, watching with wide eyes. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He ignored me. He grabbed the hem of that hideous, depressed grandmother sweater and pulled it over his head, balling it up and throwing it onto the floorboard with disgust. Underneath, he wasn't wearing a t-shirt. He was wearing a white dress shirt, the top 3 buttons undone, revealing a chest that was definitely not engineered by sitting in front of a computer screen. But it was what was strapped over the shirt that held my attention. A dual shoulder holster, leather worn soft from use, housing 2 extra magazines and a knife. He adjusted the holster, rolling his neck as if shedding the Ken persona had physically relieved a cramp. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the gelled-down, nerdy side part, letting it fall in a dark, unruly wave over his forehead. The transformation was terrifying. The clumsy geek was a mask. This lethal, cold-eyed stranger was the reality. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly, though I hated it. I forced myself to channel the same tone I used when auditing a CEO suspected of embezzlement. "And don't tell me you're a consultant." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since the shooting started. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped a speck of blood from his jaw. "I'm the man who just saved your life. You're welcome." "Saved my life?" I laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You endangered it. Those men weren't robbers holding up a bistro for the cash register. They breached through 2 entry points simultaneously. They used suppression fire to pin down the exits while the point man advanced. That was a tactical hit squad." He stopped wiping his face. His hand froze in midair. He turned his head slowly, his dark eyes narrowing. "Continue." "You think I'm stupid?" I challenged, my fear transmuting into anger. I analyze patterns for a living. Robbers want money. Kidnappers want leverage. Assassins want a body. They wanted you dead. And you, I gestured to his holster. You moved like you've done this 1,000 times. You anticipated the reload. You broke a man's neck with zero hesitation. You are not Ken the It Guy. So I will ask you one more time. Who are you? A heavy silence filled the cabin. The driver kept his eyes on the road, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. The man leaned back, a faint, dangerous smile touching the corner of his lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf realizing the sheep has sharp teeth. You're observant, Ashanti. That's a rare quality, and usually a fatal one. Is that a threat? It's a fact, he said, his voice dropping an octave. My name is Jung Ki-hyung, and you are correct. They were assassins. They belonged to a rival faction that I thought I had dismantled months ago. Young, I whispered. The name triggered a memory, not from the society pages, but from the deep web financial watch lists I monitored. The Jung Syndicate. Logistics. Shipping. Construction. And a massive invisible empire of black market trade. You're the head of the Jung Syndicate, I stated, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I went on a blind date with a mob boss. I prefer businessman, he drawled. I want out, I said, reaching for the door handle again, rattling it uselessly. Let me out right now. Drop me on the corner. I won't say anything. I just want to go home. No. Excuse me? You can't go home, Ashanti. He turned his body toward me, invading my personal space. The scent of gunpowder and expensive cologne filled my nose. They saw your face. You were sitting at my table. In their eyes, that makes you an associate. A weakness. If I let you out of this car, you will be dead within the hour. Or worse, they'll use you to get to me. I am not a weakness. I yelled, losing my composure. And I am certainly not an associate. I have a life. I have a deposition at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow with the SEC regarding the Sterling merger. I have a reputation. I cannot be kidnapped by a Korean Mafia lord because his enemies have bad aim. He blinked. You're worried about a deposition? I am a senior forensic accountant, Mr. Jung. My time is billable at $500 an hour, and right now, you are costing me money. I don't care about your turf wars. I care about my schedule. He stared at me, sheer bafflement warring with the cold calculation in his eyes. He clearly expected me to be crying about a sick mother or a cat left alone in an apartment. He wasn't prepared for me to be furious about SEC compliance. You are a strange woman, he muttered. And you are a liar, I countered. Open the door. I can't do that. The car suddenly dipped. The ambient streetlights outside the tinted windows vanished, replaced by the rhythmic strobe of overhead industrial lighting. The acoustics changed, the hum of the tires becoming a hollow roar. We were in a tunnel. Where are we going, I asked, a fresh wave of panic rising in my throat. Ki-hyung leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, the holster creaking softly. He looked at me with a terrifying finality. We are going to the only place where they can't reach you, he said softly. Forget the deposition, Ashanti. Forget the SEC. Forget your apartment. What do you mean? He looked straight into my eyes, and I saw the iron bars of a prison sentence in his gaze. Your old life ended the moment you sat down at my table. The elevator ride was a study in silence and suffocation. There were no buttons inside the brushed steel cabin, only a sleek black panel that required Ki-hyung's thumbprint and a retina scan to operate. The machine hummed, ascending 50 floors in seconds, carrying us away from the grid of the city and into the stratosphere of the untouchable. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a space that cost more than the GDP of a small island nation. The penthouse was massive, walled entirely in floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a glittering grid of lights that felt 1,000,000 miles away. But it was cold. The floors were polished concrete and black marble. The furniture was sparse, sharp-angled Italian design that looked like it had never been sat on. There were no photos, no knickknacks, no warmth. It wasn't a home, It was a mausoleum for the tax bracket that didn't pay taxes. This way, Kyung said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. He led me down a hallway lined with abstract art that looked like violence captured in oil paint. He stopped at a heavy oak door and pushed it open. "You'll stay here," he said. "It has an ensuite bathroom. There are clothes in the closet, my sister's from when she visits. They should fit." I walked in. It was a guest suite, larger than my entire apartment. And how long am I supposed to stay in this hotel room? "Until the threat is neutralized," he replied, his face an impassive mask. He held out his hand. "Your phone, Ashanti." I clutched my clutch bag tighter. "You're joking." "GPs," he said simply. "They can track it. Give it to me, or I take it." I glared at him, calculating the odds of winning a physical struggle against a man who had snapped a neck 20 minutes ago. The probability was 0. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and slapped it into his open palm. "Smart girl," he murmured. He stepped back into the hall. "I'll have food sent up. Don't try the windows, they're impact-resistant polycarbonate. Don't try the door, it locks from the outside." "Wait." I moved toward him, but the heavy door clicked shut. I heard the distinct clack whir of an electronic deadbolt engaging. I was alone. For a moment, the panic threatened to return. I was a prisoner in a glass tower. I could scream, and no one would hear me. I could pound on the door until my hands bled. But I didn't. I am Ashanti Hightower. I don't panic, I process. When the numbers don't add up, you don't cry, you audit the books. I took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of my dress, and surveyed my cage. King-sized bed, Egyptian cotton sheets, a sitting area with a velvet chaise, and in the corner, a sleek modern writing desk. I walked over to the desk. It was mostly bare, except for a stack of manila folders and a tablet resting on a charging dock. Ki Hyung had been sloppy, or maybe arrogant. He assumed that because I was a woman on a date, I wouldn't care about his paperwork. He assumed I was just a civilian who would curl up on the bed and weep. I sat down at the desk and flipped open the top folder. It was a logistics manifest. Shipping containers. Weights, measures, contents labeled as industrial machinery parts. Boring. I flipped to the next one. A bank statement from a holding company called Nebula Ventures, based in the Seychelles. Now we were talking. I started reading. At first it looked standard. Large sums moving in and out. Operating costs. Payroll. But as I traced the transaction dates, my forensic brain kicked into high gear. I forgot about the hitman. I forgot about the kidnapping. I was in the zone. I pulled the tablet off the dock. It was password protected, but the user had left the biometric bypass off for a guest profile, likely for controlling the room's lights and temperature. But the guest profile shared a local network drive with the main server. Sloppy. I accessed the shared drive. It was read-only, but that was enough. I spent the next hour cross-referencing the physical manifest in the folder with the digital cash flow on the tablet. I built a mental spreadsheet. The numbers were bleeding. Someone was structuring deposits, breaking large sums into smaller transactions to avoid detection, but they weren't doing it to hide the money from the government. They were doing it to hide the money from Ki Hyung. The door unlocked with a sharp beep. I didn't jump. I didn't hide the files. I stayed seated at the desk, my finger tracing a line on the paper ledger. Ki Hyung entered, carrying a tray with a bottle of water and a plate of something that smelled like gourmet steak. He had changed out of his blood-stained shirt into a clean black cashmere turtleneck that accentuated the width of his shoulders. He looked like the devil on his day off. He stopped when he saw me. He looked at the bed, expecting to find me huddled under the covers. Then he looked at the desk. His eyes narrowed dangerously when he saw the open files. "Those are confidential," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. He set the tray down on the bedside table with a little too much force. "I didn't realize you were a thief as well as an accountant. And I didn't realize you were incompetent," I said, not looking up from the page. The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. Ki Hyung walked toward me slowly. "Careful, Ashanti. You are testing patience I do not have." I spun the chair around to face him. I held up the manila folder, Nebula Ventures. It's your shell company for laundering the profits from the port authorities, right? His face went blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. The cash flow matches a standard layering scheme. But here's the problem, Mr. Young. You're losing 14% on every transaction cycle. He paused. His lethal composure cracked. Just a fraction. Exchange rates. Fees. No, I stood up, adrenaline sharpening my voice. I walked toward him, brandishing the bank statement like a weapon. Exchange rates fluctuate. These losses are static. Every Tuesday at 2:00 a.m., a transfer initiates to a sub-account marked consulting fees in a bank in Macau. It's categorized as overhead. I took a step closer. He didn't back down, towering over me, but he was listening. You don't have a consultant in Macau, I said, my voice steady. I checked the vendor list on your tablet. That entity doesn't exist in your official payroll. Someone is skimming off the top. They are bleeding you dry, right under your nose. Ki Hyung stared at me. The dark, abyssal look in his eyes shifted. The predator was still there, but the hunger had changed. He wasn't looking at a hostage anymore. He was looking at a riddle. Why does this matter to you? He asked quietly. Because of the restaurant, I said. Those assassins knew exactly where you were. They knew your cover. They knew the timing. A leak like that doesn't come from a rival gang watching with binoculars. It comes from someone who has access to your schedule and your finances. The person stealing your money is the same person who sold you out tonight. It wasn't a turf war, Ki Hyung. It was an inside job. He looked at the papers in my hand, then back at my face. His jaw tightened. I could see the gears turning behind those dark eyes, connecting the dots I had just laid out. The betrayal I had just uncovered was likely someone he trusted. He took the folder from my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up my arm that I refused to acknowledge. He glanced at the figures I had circled in red ink. He looked up, and a slow, terrifying smirk curved his lips. It wasn't the smile of a man who was angry. It was the smile of a man who had just found a weapon he didn't know he possessed. Prove it, he said. The lock disengaged again, but this time the sound didn't make me flinch. I was already standing by the door, waiting. Come with me, Ki Hyung said. He didn't offer an arm and he didn't pull a gun. The dynamic had shifted. I wasn't just cargo anymore. I was a consultant. An unwilling, kidnapped consultant, but a consultant nonetheless. We walked deeper into the penthouse, past the cold, sterile living areas and toward a set of double doors at the far end of the corridor. He placed his palm against a scanner. The doors hissed open, revealing a room that looked less like a home office and more like the bridge of a starship. One entire wall was dominated by a bank of high-definition monitors. Maps of the city, live feeds from shipping docks, scrolling tickers of stock prices, and encrypted communication logs flickered in a mesmerizing dance of data. The air conditioning was cranked lower here to keep the servers cool. It hummed with the quiet, expensive sound of raw computing power. Impressive, I admitted, stepping inside. My heels clicked on the glass floor. Yes, glass, with server racks visible underneath. A bit Bond villain, but efficient. Sit, Ki Hyung pointed to a sleek leather chair in front of the main console. I remained standing. I prefer to negotiate on my feet. He turned to face me, leaning back against the edge of a mahogany desk that was completely clear of paper. He crossed his arms, the muscles shifting under his black turtleneck. You were right, Ashanti. I ran a diagnostic on the Macau account. The funds are being siphoned. And the timestamp on the leak matches the encrypted burst transmission sent from this building 3 hours before our date. The call is coming from inside the house, I said dryly. Exactly. The ghost in my ledger isn't just stealing money. They are selling my movements. In 2 weeks, the syndicate hosts the Midnight Gala. It's a mandatory gathering of the 5 families. If the traitor isn't found by then, they will make a move in front of everyone. A coup. And you want me to find them. I have its specialists. I have hackers. But they look for code. They look for malware. He took a step toward me. You look for the story within the numbers. You found in 1 hour what my team missed in 6 months. He let the silence hang for a moment before dropping the offer. Find the ghost. Trace the money back to the real name. In exchange, I will give you $5 million in an offshore account, a passport with a name of your choosing, and safe passage to any country in Europe. My breath hitched. $5 million. It was more than I would make in 20 years at my firm. But the subtext was a knife to the gut. And my life here? I asked, my voice quiet. My apartment? My friends? My career? Gone, he said, without sympathy. I told you in the car, Ashanti Hightower died in that bistro. If you go back, the people who missed tonight will come back to finish the job. You are a loose end. The only way you survive is if you vanish. I felt a sting of tears, hot and sudden, but I blinked them away. I am a forensic accountant. I deal in sunk costs. My old life was a sunk cost. No amount of wishing would bring it back. The only logical variable was survival. I have conditions, I said, my voice hardening. Ki Hyung raised an eyebrow. You are in no position to make demands. I am in the only position to make demands. You need me. Your gala is in 2 weeks. You can't hire an outsider, and you can't trust your insiders. I am the only variable you can control. He stared at me, a flicker of amusement dancing in those dark, dangerous eyes. Go on. 1. Total transparency. No redactions, no need-to-know basis. If I ask for a file, I get it. If I ask for a bank key, you provide it. I can't catch a thief if I'm blindfolded. Agreed, he said. 2. My family. My sister lives in Chicago. My parents are in Atlanta. I want a surveillance detail on them. Invisible. If anyone from the rival faction gets within 10 miles of them, I want to know. And I want them neutralized. Ki Hyung nodded slowly. Done. They will be watched 24/7. 3. I walked over to the desk, running my hand along the cool surface. I am not your employee. I am not your minion. I am an independent contractor. You treat me with professional respect. No intimidation tactics. No guns on the desk while we work. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that did strange things to my insides. Are you finished? Not quite. I gestured to the chair he had offered me earlier. It was a stylish, low-backed leather bucket seat. That chair is terrible for lumbar support. If I'm going to be pulling all-nighters saving your empire, I need a Herman Miller Aron size B. I need a dual monitor setup, with a refresh rate of at least 144 Hz. I need high-speed, encrypted Wi-Fi that doesn't route through your internal firewall because your security protocols will slow me down. And I need coffee, not the sludge from a machine. Real coffee. Pour over. Single origin. Ki Hyung stared at me. For a second, I thought he might shoot me. Then, he threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't the polite laugh of a businessman. It was a genuine, surprised bark of laughter. You are demanding office furniture while held captive by the Mafia? He asked, shaking his head. Ergonomics are crucial to productivity, Mr. Jung. He walked over to the wall unit, typed a command into a console, and the lights in the room shifted from a harsh white to a warmer, focused amber. He turned back to me, the amusement fading into a sharp, focused intensity. You'll have your chair within the hour. The hardware is already top of the line. Check the specs yourself. As for the respect... He stepped close, looming over me, his scent enveloping me again. Clean, masculine, dangerous. Earn it. He gestured to the main console. I didn't back down. I walked past him, claiming the space. I sat down in the terrible leather chair. He was right. It was uncomfortable, and woke the system. The screens flared to life, casting a blue glow over my face. I cracked my knuckles. I saw the directory of financial logs waiting for me. It was a mess. A beautiful, chaotic, criminal mess. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was my world. He might rule the streets, but in here, in the data, I was the queen. I looked up at the most dangerous man in the city, who was watching me with a look that hovered somewhere between suspicion and fascination. Well, I said, arching an eyebrow. Pour me some coffee, boss. We have work to do. The city was weeping. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling glass of the penthouse, turning the panoramic view of the skyline into a blurred, watery, impressionist painting. It was 3:00 am. The world was asleep, but in the command center, time didn't exist. The only light came from the bank of monitors in front of me, casting a cool spectral blue glow over my hands as they flew across the mechanical keyboard. My eyes were dry, burning with fatigue, but my mind was wired, fueled by the third cup of single-origin pour-over coffee that had miraculously appeared at my elbow an hour ago. I was deep in the digital trenches, tearing apart the sub-ledger of Nebula Ventures. I was hunting for patterns, microtransactions that didn't fit the algorithm of standard money laundering. Behind me, there was a different kind of rhythm. Click. Snap. Slide. Jung Ki-hyung was sitting on the edge of his mahogany desk, bathed in the shadows. He wasn't looking at screens. He was methodically dismantling a matte black handgun. A Sig Sauer P226. I knew the model because I'd looked it up earlier, needing to categorize the threat level in the room. He cleaned the weapon with the same obsessive precision I applied to spreadsheets. He wiped the slide, oiled the spring, and reassembled the mechanism with a blind familiarity. The contrast was jarring. I was fighting a war with data, tracing the invisible currents of corruption. He was preparing for a war of blood and bone. My weapon was the mind. His was the metal. And yet, in this quiet, storm-battered room, the two felt strangely aligned. "You're frowning." His voice cut through the silence, deep and textured like rough velvet. I didn't stop typing. "I'm not frowning. I'm thinking. There's a variance in the Q3 reports that doesn't make sense. Someone is paying a vendor listed as catering, but the routing number goes to a bank in Estonia known for handling crypto exchanges, Ashanti." The way he said my name, slowly, rolling the syllables, made my fingers pause. I spun my chair around. He had set the gun down. He was watching me, his dark eyes reflecting the blue light of the screens. He looked tired too, but it only made him look more dangerous, like a wolf waiting out a storm. "Why are you single?" he asked. The question was so unexpected, so mundane in the midst of our high-stakes reality, that I laughed. "Is this part of the interrogation?" "Curiosity," he countered. "You are beautiful. You are brilliant. You have a spine of steel. Yet, according to your file, you live alone, you spend your weekends working, and your last relationship ended 3 years ago. Why?" I looked at him, measuring my answer. I could give him the polite version, that I was busy, that I was career-focused. But the air in the room was too heavy for small talk. We were conspirators now. "Men don't like women who can calculate their net worth faster than they can order dinner," I said softly, leaning back in the ergonomic chair I had demanded. "I see details. Ki-hyung. I notice when their stories don't line up. I notice when they're living beyond their means. I notice the lies before they even speak them. It intimidates them. They want a girlfriend, not an auditor." Ki-hyung slid off the desk. He walked toward me, his movements silent on the glass floor. He stopped just inches from my knees, towering over me. The space between us suddenly felt charged, the air thick with static electricity. "Cowards," he murmured. "Most men are," I agreed, my breath hitching slightly as he leaned down, bracing his hands on the armrests of my chair, trapping me in his space. "I am not looking for a dependent, Ashanti," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that vibrated in my chest. "I don't want someone who needs me to open the door or pay the bill. I live in a world where everyone wants something from me. Power, protection, money." He reached out, his hand hovering for a second before his fingers grazed the side of my neck. His skin was rough, calloused from the gun, but his touch was shockingly gentle. He traced the line of my jaw, his thumb resting against my pulse point. He must have felt how fast my heart was racing. "I don't want a fan," he continued, his eyes searching mine, dark and intense. "I'm looking for an equal, someone who sees the monster and doesn't run, someone who can stand in the fire with me and not burn." "I might burn," I whispered, my voice betraying me. "No." He shook his head, leaning closer. His lips were inches from mine now. I could smell the gun oil, the rain, and the warm musk scent of his skin. "You are the fire. My logical brain, the part of me that analyzed risk and consequence, was screaming danger. This was the Stockholm Syndrome talking. This was a trauma bond. This was the most irrational thing I could possibly do. But my body didn't care about logic. My body wanted to close that gap. I tilted my head back, my eyes fluttering shut, surrendering to the pull. His breath brushed against my lips, hot and demanding. Ping. The sound was sharp and piercing, cutting through the haze of desire like a knife. My eyes snapped open. Ki-hong froze. It was the computer. The search algorithm I had set up an hour ago. The match, I gasped, the professional part of my brain slamming back into the driver's seat. I scrambled back, spinning the chair around to face the screens. Ki-hyung straightened up immediately, the lover vanishing, the boss returning. He stood behind me, looking over my shoulder. "What is it?" he demanded. "The vendor," I said, typing furiously to bring up the details. "The catering company in Estonia." I ran a cross-reference on their tax ID against the dark web databases. I hit enter. A profile loaded on the center screen. It wasn't a catering company. "It's a front for Black Ridge," I explained, pointing at the logo, a stylized mountain peak. "They're a private military contractor. Mercenaries. Highly trained, ex-special forces, usually hired for coups in third-world countries." "Mercenaries," Ki-hyung repeated, his voice cold. "Look at the transaction dates." I highlighted the column. "The payments have been ramping up for 3 months. But the final payment, the activation fee, is scheduled to clear on the 14th. "The 14th, Ki-hyung said. "That's the night of the midnight gala." "Exactly," I turned to look at him. "The traitor isn't just stealing from you, Ki-hyung. They're using your own money to build an army. They aren't planning to embarrass you at the gala. They're planning a massacre. They're going to wipe out the entire leadership of the syndicate in one night." The realization hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. If we hadn't found this, he would have walked into a slaughterhouse. Ki-hyung stared at the screen, his face hard as granite. He absorbed the information, processing the betrayal, the strategy, the nearness of his own death. Then, he looked down at me. The hardness in his eyes softened, just around the edges. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his hand lingering on my cheek. "You just saved the syndicate, Ashanti," he said softly, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, "and you looked beautiful doing it." The box was waiting on the bed. It was black velvet, tied with a silver ribbon, innocent enough until you opened it. Inside lay a gown of midnight blue silk, the fabric so dark it looked like a bruise under moonlight. I lifted it out, the material slipping through my fingers like water. It was backless, with a plunging neckline and a slit that ran dangerously high up the left thigh. Beautiful. But I wasn't looking for beauty. I was looking for utility. I checked the seams. Reinforced stitching. Good. I checked the skirt volume. Enough flow to conceal a weapon, not enough to trip me up if I had to sprint. I pulled the dress on. It fit like a second skin, clinging to every curve before cascading to the floor. I strapped the slim polymer holster to my left thigh. The Sig Sauer P365, a smaller, compact version of Ki-hyung's gun, slid into place, perfectly hidden by the silk. I checked my reflection. I didn't look like an accountant. I looked like a femme fatale from a noir film who was about to ruin a man's life. And that was exactly the plan. The door opened. Ki-hyung stepped in, adjusting the cufflinks of his tuxedo. He froze. He wore a bespoke black tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders with criminal perfection. His hair was styled back, severe and elegant, exposing the sharp angles of his face. But his eyes, those dark, abyssal eyes, were locked on me. He didn't speak. He just dragged his gaze from the hem of the gown up to my face, devouring me slowly. "Is it too much?" I asked, smoothing the silk over my hip, feeling the cold weight of the gun beneath. "It is lethal," he murmured, walking toward me. He stood behind me, his eyes meeting mine in the vanity mirror. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a diamond choker. He fastened it around my neck, his fingers lingering on my skin. "Mr. Vane is a man of expensive tastes. He won't be able to resist." "He's a banker." "Ki-hyung," I corrected, meeting his gaze in the glass. He won't be able to resist the portfolio I'm about to pitch him. The dress is just the packaging. Let's go, he whispered, his breath stirring the hair at the nape of my neck. The car is waiting. The midnight gala was an assault on the senses. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds, champagne, and fake smiles. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner, struggling to be heard over the murmur of politicians, celebrities, and criminals pretending to be philanthropists. As we stepped onto the red carpet, flashbulbs erupted like staccato gunfire. I flinched instinctively, a reflex from the restaurant attack, but Ki-hyung's hand tightened on my waist. It was a heavy, possessive grip. An anchor, smile, he whispered, his lips brushing my ear, looking for all the world like a devoted lover sharing a secret. You adore me. I am the center of your universe. I looked up at him, plastering a dazzling smile on my face. Don't let it go to your head, boss. I'm just acting. Are you? He challenged, a smirk playing on his lips as he guided me through the crush. We moved through the crowd, a shark and his siren. Ki-hyung navigated the room with a predator's grace, nodding to associates, ignoring rivals, but his eyes were constantly scanning. Target at 3 o'clock, he murmured, pulling 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter and handing one to me. Near the ice sculpture. Gray suit. Balding. Looks like he's sweating scotch. I spotted him. Mr. Vane, the corrupt banker who held the digital keys to the mercenary fund. I see him, I said. Dance with me first, Ki-hyung said, taking my glass and setting it down on a nearby table. We need to blend in. Vane is paranoid. If you approach him cold, he'll bolt. He pulled me onto the dance floor. The music shifted to a slow waltz. Ki-hyung's hand slid down my back, resting possessively on the curve of my spine, dangerously close to the exposed skin. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the hard muscle beneath the expensive wool. We moved together. It was effortless. For a terrifying moment, the mission faded. There was just the heat of his body, the scent of his cologne, and the way he looked at me, not as an asset, but as a woman he wanted to claim. You're trembling, he said softly. I'm anticipating the audit, I lied. He spun me out and pulled me back in, flush against his chest. Focus, Ashanti. The scanner is in your clutch. You need to get within 6 inches of his jacket pocket. Clone the NFC tag. You have 10 seconds before the encryption resets. I know the specs, Ki-hyung, I whispered, breathless from the spin. I wrote the code for the override. Good. Go. He released me. The loss of his touch was sudden and cold. I took a deep breath, retrieved my clutch, and transformed. The accountant vanished. The seductress took over. I sauntered toward the bar. Mr. Vane was nursing a whiskey, looking bored and anxious. I slid into the space next to him, signaling the bartender. Sparkling water with a twist of lime, I ordered, my voice husky. I turned to Vane, catching his eye. You look like a man who knows the market is about to crash. Vane blinked, surprised. He looked at the dress, then at my face. Excuse me? The bond yield curve inverted this morning, I said casually, leaning an elbow on the bar, bringing my clutch closer to him. Most people here are celebrating, but you have the look of someone heavily leveraged in emerging markets. Thailand? Or perhaps Estonia? Vane stiffened. The mention of Estonia, where the mercenary bank was located, hit the mark. He turned fully toward me, intrigued. You have a sharp eye for a civilian, he sneered, though his eyes were undressing me. I'm not a civilian. I'm a risk analyst, I purred, stepping into his personal space. I reached out, brushing an imaginary piece of lint from his lapel. And right now, Mr. Vane, you look like a very high risk. My clutch pressed against the side of his suit jacket. 1 second. 2 seconds. Who do you work for? Vane asked, his voice dropping, suspicion warring with attraction. I work for the highest bidder, I said, holding his gaze. The tiny lead on my clutch blinked green. Clone complete. Maybe we should discuss my portfolio in private, Vane suggested, licking his lips. Maybe later, I smiled, stepping back. I have to check the numbers first. I turned and walked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had it. The key to the mercenary fund. The key to stopping the massacre. I scanned the room for Ki Hyung. I found him near the exit, waiting. But as I walked, I felt eyes on me. Not the lustful eyes of the crowd. Panic. I glanced back. Mr. Vane wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me. He was looking at the man waiting for me in the shadows. Vane's face went white. He recognized the silhouette. He recognized the posture. The young syndicate. Vane's hand flew to his ear. He began shouting into his lapel microphone, signaling security. Ki Hyung saw it happen. His demeanor shifted instantly from gala guest to combatant. He strode toward me, closing the distance in 3 long strides. He didn't offer his arm. He grabbed my hand, his grip crushing. "He made me," I hissed. "I know," Ki Hyung replied, his voice calm and terrifying. He began dragging me toward the service exit, moving fast enough to draw stairs. "We have the key. Time to go. Now." The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the gunfire had been. We had made it back, shedding the black SUVs and switching vehicles 3 times. But the adrenaline was still humming in my blood like a high-voltage wire. I didn't change out of the midnight blue gown. I kicked off my heels by the door and went straight to the command center. My feet were bare against the cold glass floor, grounding me. "Give me the key," I said. Ki Hyung handed me the clone device. He looked like a man holding together a crumbling dam. He poured himself a drink, amber liquid splashing into heavy crystal, and stood by the window, staring out at the rain-lashed city he claimed to rule. I plugged the device into the main terminal. The screens flickered, lines of code cascaded like digital rain, stripping away the layers of encryption Mr. Vane had built to hide the mercenary fund. "It's decrypting," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "We'll have the source name in 10 seconds. Ki Hyung didn't turn around. It's probably the Russians. Or the Triad. Maybe," I murmured. 98%, 99%, 100%. The final layer dissolved. The beneficiary name flashed on the center screen in stark, white letters. My heart stopped. I blinked, hoping it was a glitch. I ran the trace again. Same result. The money wasn't going to a rival. It wasn't going to a foreign enemy. "Ki Hyung," I whispered. He heard the change in my tone. The glass in his hand froze halfway to his mouth. He turned slowly, his face a mask of wary anticipation. "Who is it?" I couldn't say it. I felt sick. I knew the history. I had read the files. I knew who had taken Ki Hyung off the streets when he was 10 years old. I knew who had taught him to fight, to think, to lead. "Look," I said, stepping away from the screen. He walked over. He looked at the monitor. He read the name. Director Min Sok. For a long moment nothing happened. The only sound was the hum of the servers. Ki Hyung stared at the name of his mentor, his father figure, the man he trusted above all others. "No," he said. It was a quiet, broken sound. "The digital signature matches," I said softly, aching for him. The authorization came from his personal terminal. He hired Black Ridge. He ordered the hit at the bistro. He wants to wipe out the board and take the throne, Ki Hyung. "No." The roar tore out of him, a primal wounded sound that shook the walls. He hurled the crystal glass across the room. It shattered against the far wall, shards raining down like diamonds. But he wasn't done. The betrayal was a physical thing, a poison in his veins that he had to bleed out. He swept his arm across the desk, sending monitors, keyboards, and lamps crashing to the floor. Sparks flew as electronics died. He turned to the nearest glass panel, a decorative partition, and punched it. Crack. The safety glass spiderwebbed under the force of his fist. He punched it again. And again. His breathing was ragged, harsh gasps tearing from his chest. He was destroying his sanctuary because it had been built on a lie. Most women would have run. A rational person would have retreated to the bedroom and locked the door until the storm passed. I am not most women. I walked through the debris. I stepped over the broken glass, ignoring the sharp edges near my bare feet. I walked straight to the man who was currently vibrating with enough rage to level the city. Ki Hyung. He didn't hear me. He was staring at his bloody knuckles, his chest heaving. I reached out and took his hand, the one he had used to punch the wall. He flinched, his head snapping toward me. His eyes were wild, dilated, unrecognizable. "Don't," he rasped, pulling back. "I will hurt you. Stay away." "You won't," I said firmly. I didn't let go. I pulled his damaged hand to my chest, pressing his bloodied knuckles against the silk of my dress, right over my heart. "You won't hurt me." He was my father," Ki-hyung choked out, his voice cracking, the ruthless mafia boss dissolving into a betrayed child. "I gave him everything." "I know," I whispered. "I know." He looked at me, really looked at me, and the rage in his eyes began to shift. It morphed into something else, something desperate and hungry. He looked at me like I was the only solid thing in a world that had just turned into quicksand. "Make it stop," he groaned. "Ashanti, make the noise stop." He didn't wait for permission. He crashed into me. His mouth found mine, not gentle, not tentative, but starving. It was a kiss of devastation. He kissed me like he was trying to breathe my air because his own was toxic. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, meeting his desperation with my own. The silk of my dress was a thin barrier against the heat of his body. I felt the hard ridges of his muscles, the tension in his frame, the sheer raw power of him. He lifted me effortlessly, my legs wrapping around his waist, and carried me out of the ruined office. He didn't stop until we reached the bedroom. He lowered me onto the bed, following me down, his weight a heavy grounding comfort. "You're the only truth left," he whispered against my skin, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't lie to me, Ashanti. Never lie to me." "I'm here," I promised, my fingers tangling in his dark hair. "I'm right here." The night blurred into a haze of sensation. There were no more words, only the language of touch. His hands, usually so lethal, worshipped my skin. He touched me with a reverence that made my breath catch, mapping my body as if memorizing a holy text. It wasn't just sex. It was an exorcism. He was pouring all his grief, his anger, and his fear into me, and I took it all. I anchored him. I became the eye of his storm. The friction of skin against skin, the heat, the sweat, the tangled sheets. It was a desperate affirmation of life in the face of death. Hours later, the storm had passed. The rain had stopped outside. The room was quiet, bathed in the soft gray light of approaching dawn. Ki-hyung was asleep. The man who never slept, the man who was always watching the door, was passed out, his heavy arm thrown over my waist, holding me even in his dreams. His face was pressed into the curve of my neck, his breathing slow and deep. I lay awake, watching the rise and fall of his chest. The sharp lines of his face had softened. The cruelty was gone. He looked peaceful. He looked human. I brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, my heart aching with a terrifying realization. I wasn't just his accountant anymore, and he wasn't just my captor. We were partners, and if Director Min wanted to kill him, he was going to have to go through me. Sunlight hit my face like an accusation. I woke up reaching for him, my hand sweeping across the other side of the bed. The sheets were cold. I sat up, blinking against the harsh morning glare. The softness of the night before, the vulnerability, the shared breath, the silent promises, had evaporated. In its place stood a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. Ki-hyung was standing by the window, fully dressed in tactical black. He was holstering his weapon, his back to me. He didn't look like the lover who had held me while he slept. He looked like the boss of the young syndicate. "Get dressed," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "You're leaving." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, the sudden shift in temperature making me shiver. "What? Is the coffee ready?" He turned around. His face was a closed door. "There is no coffee. There is a helicopter waiting on the roof in 10 minutes. It will take you to a private airfield. You're going to a safe house in Zurich. New identity, new accounts. The deal is done." I stared at him, the hurt flaring up before I could stop it. But then my brain caught up. I saw the tension in his jaw. I saw the way his hand hovered over his gun, not out of aggression, but out of a need for control. He wasn't rejecting me. He was terrified. I threw off the covers and stood up, not caring that I was naked. I walked straight to my discarded dress. So that's it? We sleep together, and you ship me off to Switzerland? It was a mistake, he said coldly. Last night was a lapse in judgment. You are a civilian. You are a liability. I can't fight a war with men if I'm worried about babysitting you. I pulled the silk dress on, my movements jerky with anger. I marched up to him and poked him hard in the chest. Don't lie to me, I hissed. And don't you dare do the noble sacrifice thing. It's a cheap cliche, and you're better than that. We are partners, Ki-hyung. I found the leak. I decrypted the ledger. You need me. I need you safe. He roared, the mask cracking for a split second. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip desperate. Min knows. If he knows about the money, he knows about you. You are the only thing in this world he can use to break me. I won't let him have you. Then let me fight. I yelled back, I am not a damsel. I am the one who... Beep. 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 The sound wasn't the frantic alarm of an intruder. It was the low, rhythmic chime of a system override. The warm amber lights of the penthouse suddenly flooded red. The automated blinds began to rise, exposing us to the city. System override, Alpha Min. A computerized voice announced smoothly. Welcome home, Director. Ki-hyung's face went pale. He has the master codes. He shoved me down behind the heavy oak desk just as the front doors of the penthouse, doors that were supposed to be impenetrable, slid open with a cheerful ding. 3 metal canisters rolled across the floor, hissing. Gas. Ki-hyung shouted. White smoke exploded into the room, thick and acrid. It wasn't just smoke, it was tear gas mixed with a tranquilizer agent. My lungs seized instantly. My eyes burned like they had been doused in acid. Stay down, Ki-hyung ordered. He didn't take cover. He moved. Through the haze, I saw shadows pouring into the room. Men in gas masks, moving with military precision. They weren't here to talk. Ki-hyung met them in the center of the room. He was a blur of violence. He didn't shoot. The smoke was too thick to risk hitting me, so he used his hands. He disarmed the first mercenary, snapping the man's arm like a twig, and used the body as a shield against the others. He moved with a terrifying, fluid grace, a demon dancing in the smoke. Crack. A knee to a chest. Thud. A gun whipped across a helmet. But the gas was filling the room. Ki-hyung coughed, his movements slowing. He was fighting an army while holding his breath. I couldn't just watch. I scanned the floor. A heavy brass statue lay near the desk. I grabbed it, my fingers slipping on the smooth metal. A mercenary loomed out of the smoke to my left, spotting me. He lunged. I didn't scream. I swung the statue with every ounce of strength I had, aiming for the knee. He grunted as the brass connected, stumbling. I scrambled back, looking for a weapon, for anything. But a second man appeared behind me. A heavy, gloved hand clamped over my mouth. Another grabbed my waist. Got the package. A distorted voice shouted through a mask. I bit down on the hand, hard. I tasted leather and blood. The man swore, but he didn't let go. He dragged me backward, my heels skidding uselessly on the glass floor. Ki-hyung. I screamed, the name tearing out of my burning throat. Ki-hyung spun around. He saw them taking me. For a moment, he abandoned all defense. He roared, a sound of pure fury, and charged toward us. He took 2 bullets to the chest, his Kevlar vest absorbing the impact, but the force knocked him back. He stumbled, fell to one knee, and fired blindly. One of my captors dropped, but 2 more took his place. They were dragging me toward the service elevator. No. I fought, kicking, scratching, clawing. Ki-hyung was crawling toward me now. Blood was seeping from a wound in his leg, leaving a dark streak on the pristine white floor. His eyes were locked on mine, wide, terrified, and burning with a helplessness that broke my heart. He reached out a hand, his fingers straining toward me. Ashanti. They threw me into the elevator. I lunged for the doors, my fingers brushing the metal, but the mercenary slammed his fist into my temple. My vision blurred. The last thing I saw before the silver doors slid shut was Jung Ki-hyung, the invincible Mafia boss, alone in the center of his ruined empire, surrounded by enemies, reaching for a ghost. The doors sealed with a final, hydraulic hiss. I slumped against the metal wall, darkness pulling me under. But even as I faded, I knew one thing. They hadn't killed him. That was their mistake. They had left the wolf alive. And now, he had nothing left to lose. The smell of rust and low tide was the first thing to hit me. Then, the throbbing pain in my temple where the mercenary had struck me. I opened my eyes. I was tied to a metal chair in the center of a cavernous, abandoned warehouse. Rain drummed relentlessly against the corrugated tin roof, drowning out the distant sounds of the harbor. My wrists were zip-tied behind me, biting into my skin, but I didn't struggle. I tested the tension. Tight. Professional. You're awake. Director Min stepped into the pool of harsh yellow light cast by a single hanging bulb. He looked like a grandfather. Kind eyes, gray hair, a soft cardigan. It was terrifying how normal he looked. This was the man who had raised Ki-hyung. This was the man who had ordered his execution. "Where is the key, Ashanti?" he asked, his voice gentle, as if asking for a cup of tea. "The Swiss accounts. The mercenary fund. I know you moved it before you were taken." I straightened my spine, ignoring the headache. I looked him dead in the eye. "It's gone, Min." He sighed, a disappointed sound. He nodded to a man standing in the shadows, a brute with a tactical knife. The man stepped forward. "Don't play games," Min said. "We can do this the easy way, or we can start removing fingers. You need to type the authorization code." I laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound, but it made the brute pause. Min frowned. "Something is funny?" "You are," I said, shaking my head. "You think this is about a password? You think I'm just an accountant?" I leaned forward as much as the ropes would allow. "I didn't just move the money, Director. I restructured the entire asset class. I transferred the mercenary fund, all $200 million of it, into a frozen escrow account. Give me the code." Min snapped, losing his patience. "I can't." I lied smoothly. "It's not password protected. It's biometric. Specifically, it's linked to a dead man's switch connected to my smartwatch." I glanced down at my wrist, which was currently bare, but Min didn't know the specs of the tech I used. It monitors my heart rate. If my pulse stops, or if it drops below a certain threshold, poof. The money automatically disperses to 500 different charities. You lose everything. Instantly. Min froze. He stared at me, his greed warring with his fear. He didn't understand the technology, and that was his weakness. He had to believe me. "You're bluffing," he hissed. "Am I?" I raised an eyebrow. "Are you willing to bet $200 million on it? Go ahead. Cut a finger off. If my heart rate spikes too high from shock, money's gone." "Kill me? Money's gone. You need me calm, Min. You need me happy." Min paced, furious. He looked at the brute. "Back off. Don't touch her." He turned back to me, his face red. "We will wait. We will get a hacker to bypass the..." Click. The warehouse plunged into darkness. The single hanging bulb died. The floodlights outside cut out. The only light came from the lightning flashing through the high broken windows. "What is that?" Min shouted, spinning around. "Get the backup generator." "Boss, I can't see anything." One of the mercenaries yelled. Then, the sounds began. A soft, compressed cough of air. Then the wet thud of a body hitting the concrete. Pft, pft. 2 more thuds. Fire. Min screamed, pulling a revolver from his waistband. "Shoot anything that moves." Muzzle flashes lit up the dark like strobe lights, revealing brief, terrifying glimpses of the carnage. In one flash, I saw him. Jung Ki-hyung. He wasn't the polished CEO in a tuxedo. He was a nightmare. He was limping slightly, his left leg leaving a trail of blood, and his tactical vest was shredded. But he moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible. He was a shadow detaching itself from the dark. He didn't just shoot. He flowed through the mercenaries like water, using his knife, his gun, his hands. He was the wolf, and the sheep were screaming. Silence fell as quickly as the violence had started. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs, ironically proving my heartbeat lie wrong. But no one was checking. Min. Ki-hyung's voice echoed from the darkness. It was low, broken, and terrifying. It's over. The emergency lights flickered on, dim, red, and eerie. Min was standing behind me. In a panic, he grabbed my hair and yanked my head back, jamming the cold barrel of his revolver against my temple. Stay back. Min shrieked, his composure gone. I'll kill her. I swear to God, Ki-hyung, I'll blow her brains out. Ki-hyung stepped into the pool of red light. He was 10 feet away. He was covered in blood. Some his, mostly others. He had his gun raised, aimed directly at Min's head. But he hesitated. Min was using my body as a shield. Ki-hyung's eyes locked onto mine. I saw the agony in them. He couldn't take the shot. The risk was too high. If he missed by an inch, I was dead. Drop the gun. Min yelled, pressing the barrel harder against my skin. Drop it, or the girl dies. Ki-hyung's hand trembled. He started to lower the weapon. He was going to surrender. He was going to let men win to save me. No. I wouldn't let him die for me. We were partners. I couldn't speak, but my hands were tied to the metal armrests of the chair. My fingers found the cold steel. Tap. Tap, tap. Tap. I tapped out a rhythm. Ki-hyung's eyes flickered down to my hands, then back to my eyes. He recognized it. It was the rhythm from the restaurant, the tactical cadence. It was a countdown. Tap. 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 I held his gaze, willing him to trust me. I tapped the final beat. Tap. On the beat, I didn't pull away. I threw my entire body weight downward, lifting my legs and slamming my heels into the floor, while simultaneously jerking my head forward. Min, expecting me to pull away, was caught off guard. For a fraction of a second, his aim faltered. My head dropped 6 inches out of the line of fire. Bang. Ki-hyung didn't hesitate. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. I felt the heat of the bullet pass inches above my scalp. Behind me there was a sickening crunch, like a melon being dropped on concrete. The grip on my hair released instantly. Director Min collapsed backward, a single clean hole in the center of his forehead. I gasped, air rushing back into my lungs. Ashanti. Ki-hyung was there before I could blink. He holstered his gun and fell to his knees beside the chair. His hands, usually so steady, were shaking as he pulled a knife to slice through the zip ties on my wrists. Are you hurt? He demanded, his voice rough, frantic. He grabbed my face, checking my eyes, my temple, my neck. Did he touch you? I'm fine, I choked out, my hands finally free. I reached for him, grabbing the front of his blood-soaked vest. I'm fine. You're the one bleeding. I don't care, he breathed. He pulled me into him, burying his face in the crook of my neck. He held me so tight it hurt, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around his shoulders, feeling the tremors running through his body. The monster was gone. The boss was gone. This was just a man who had almost lost the only thing that mattered. I thought I lost you, he whispered into my skin, his voice breaking. When the elevator closed, I thought that was it. You can't get rid of me that easily. I whispered back, tears finally spilling over. I still haven't sent you the bill for my consulting fees. He let out a jagged, wet laugh. He pulled back, looking at me with an intensity that burned. He wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb, smearing a little blood on my skin. But it didn't matter. It was a war paint of survival. Let's go home, Ashanti, he said. To the penthouse? I asked. No. He shook his head, standing up and pulling me to my feet, supporting my weight. The penthouse is compromised. We're going somewhere else. Somewhere no one can find us. He scooped me up into his arms, ignoring his own limp, and carried me out of the warehouse, into the rain, leaving the bodies and the betrayal behind us in the dark. 3 months later, the Paris sunlight was golden, spilling over the wrought iron balcony of the cafe and warming the rim of my espresso cup. It was a stark, beautiful contrast to the gray rain and gunpowder that had defined my life just 90 days ago. I adjusted the lapel of my white tailored blazer. No more silk gowns. No more hiding. I was the chief financial officer of Young Logistics, a perfectly legitimate shipping conglomerate that dominated the European market. Well, mostly legitimate. Across the table, Ki Hyung was reading the Financial Times. He looked different. The lines of exhaustion around his eyes were gone, smoothed away by peace and proximity. He wasn't wearing body armor today, just a navy linen suit that cost more than the calf we were sitting in. Clatter. A young waiter dropped a silver spoon onto a ceramic saucer at the next table. The sharp, metallic ring cut through the ambient chatter. Ki-hyung didn't flinch. He didn't jump. But his right hand moved. It was a blur, a phantom reflex reaching for a holster that wasn't there anymore. His eyes snapped up, instantly scanning the perimeter, assessing threats, calculating exit routes. I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. My touch was the only thing faster than his reflexes. "Relax," I murmured, holding his gaze. "He's just clumsy. Not an assassin." Ki-hyung blinked. The cold, lethal mask dissolved, replaced by a sheepish, weary smile. He turned his hand over, intertwining his fingers with mine. "Old habits. We're safe," I reminded him. "You cleaned house. There's no one left to come after us." "There is always someone," he corrected gently, lifting my hand to his lips. "But let them come. We are ready." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He slid it across the white tablecloth. I raised an eyebrow. "Is this a performance bonus?" "Open it." I flipped the lid. Inside sat a ring, not a delicate traditional diamond, but a stunning architectural band of platinum set with a rare black onyx stone. It was heavy, modern, and unbreakable. "It's not just a ring," he said softly, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "It's a partnership. 50-50. My life, my empire, my heart. You own half of everything, Ashanti." I slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. It felt like armor. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his voice. "That night? The blind date?" I looked at the ring, then at the man who had burned down half the underworld just to keep me safe. I leaned back, sipping my espresso, a dangerous, happy smile curving my lips. "Are you kidding?" I laughed softly. "I went looking for a free meal and found a king. Best bad date of my life."
Oh, this is very intellectual, educational, steeped in emotional intelligence, scientifically and clinically fully displayed.